Imagine waking up tomorrow never needing a paycheck again. That's the dream, right? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you 5 real assets that can pay you in your sleep, no fluff, no hype. Just practical, proven ways that can replace your salary income with investment income. Let's jump in. I would really appreciate it too if you gave this video a like and if you subscribed to my channel. So with that, let's keep moving. And I wanted to really talk about goal setting first. In other words, what are your goals in life? Because there's 2 very distinct types of income. And I wanted to kind of review them first, right? So first we have the job income, which most of us know. And then there's something called investment income. Very briefly, job income, you know this. You have an alarm. If you're like me, you set snooze like 9 times before you actually get out of bed. You have a cubicle typically in jobs, right? And that's not always fun because cubicles can sometimes remind you, or they remind me at least, of jail cells. So not very fun, very structured, but the good news is that there's something called, typically at least, reliable income. And that's generally what a 9-to-5 job is known for. It's reliable income. You know, every 2 weeks, every month, whatever your paycheck cadence is, you'll get money in the bank account. At least that's the hope. And then there's something called investment income. Investment income is essentially where you can sit on the beach, you'll have your laptop, maybe a cup of coffee if you're a coffee drinker like me, and you have a lot more freedom. That's really what this picture is trying to show you, freedom. Now, I do want to caveat this a little bit. And I want to say that investment income, while it looks easy, it's not necessarily that easy to gain. Why? Because there's things called time, for example, to build up the wealth. And then there's also something called just like small chance, right? Small chance of success. And the reason why I bring this up is because oftentimes we hear so many people say, oh, if you just spend 5 hours a day for 6 months, you're going to be making $50,000 a month. Or I'm exaggerating, but that's generally what you hear people say about investment income. And you'll see what I mean by investment income. It doesn't just mean stock market income. It also means like investment income from a business, for example, by building your own business. And while it's certainly true you can make your own income from a business, it's not always that easy. And trust me as a business owner, I can tell you the ups and the downs. In fact, there's a funny saying that goes, as a business owner, I sleep like a baby. I wake up every 2 hours and cry. And when I read this saying, I thought it was hilarious because honestly, maybe it's a little exaggerated, but it's true, right? Because you're so invested in your business, it is like your baby and you're gonna have to wake up whenever there's a fire. Versus in a 9-to-5 job income, that's probably not always going to be the case, or most often not the case. So just keep those 2 things in mind. Very important to know the difference and very important to know the pros and the cons. So the difference also between these 2 is one is active income, one is passive income. Which one do you think is active? If you said the job income, then you're right. Job income is active income. Why? Because you are exchanging your hours for money, okay? So money flows into your pocket in exchange for your time. Right? So that is job income. Investment income is passive income. And the reason why investment income is passive income is because you generally don't have to exchange a commensurate or a proportionate amount of hours of your time in order to get the same amount of money. Maybe you have a lot of upfront work, right? So typically, if you're a business owner, for example, you're going to have to put in a lot of time and effort upfront and probably not be compensated for any of that time. But then on the back end, assuming your business runs and assuming your business is doing okay, you're probably going to make a lot more money and not have to work that much. So you have a lot of upfront work, but then likely down the road, you probably have less work, but you have more money. And that's, of course, everyone's dream. Does it turn out like that for everyone? Not necessarily, but that is the dream. And investment income can mean a business, but it could also mean stocks, right? Like a stock market or bonds from the bond market. It could mean many things. And there's a ton of other options, but these are the top 3 that came to my mind. So let's take a look at a little bit closer the benefits of active versus passive income. So on the left-hand side, you have active income, which again is from a job. Here, you know it's reliable, or at least for the most part, you expect it to be reliable, come into your bank account every couple of weeks. It's consistent, again, assuming you do your work and assuming your work is okay, you're probably going to get paid. And then you have opportunities for career advancement. So maybe you're working in a corporate job. For example, if you're a lawyer, you're probably going to start out as an associate. Then you're going to continue as associate partner, then maybe partner, then senior partner, managing director, etc. So there's a very clear career trajectory and a career ladder laid out in front of you. And if you are a business owner, on the other hand, there's probably not that much structure in your business. Maybe you're comfortable being in this flexible, fluid environment, but not everyone is. And some people have trouble not having a structure in place, which is okay, but that's a drawback. It might be more fulfilling. You might have a job that you love. So it's totally fine if you have a 9-to-5. I'm not here to put down 9-to-5ers. I think that's totally fine. And oftentimes the people I know, they don't work 9-to-5. They work like 9 to midnight. So, it's a lot of work. And it can be more lucrative than passive income in some cases. That's absolutely true. In fact, I have a few statistics, if you keep watching the video, that talk about the average income of someone who is a business owner, a small business owner in the United States. It is 6 figures, but it's not a gigantic amount. In fact, you can make more and have much less stress if you're 9-to-5 in some instances. So just things to think about. And then finally, you do get benefits. I personally think this is a huge benefit, being a 9-to-5 or having a job, like a steady salary, because they pay benefits like life insurance, health insurance, disability insurance. As a business owner, I can tell you, when I pay these benefits, that is a lot of money, and I get pretty depressed when I see that money going out because it's all me that has to pay. I don't have any type of employer contribution. Why? Because I'm my employer, right? So that can get a little bit sad. But this is specifically if you own a business. Passive income doesn't just mean you own a business. Like I said before, passive income could mean a business, it could mean stocks, it could mean bonds, it could mean many things. So this was just an example for business ownership, but you could have, other options. It's typically less labor intensive. Again, think about this. You have a lot more upfront work, but then toward the end, you have much less work and typically more money. So that's what this means. Less labor intensive, more free time, more flexibility and freedom, potential to make more than any job can provide. That's absolutely true. No chance of being fired. Why? Because you're your own boss. The thing I would say, though, to this, I'm going to put a little asterisk here. That's not completely true, because even though you're your own boss, that's not really true. Your clients, your clients are your boss now. So if your clients are your boss, your clients, they can absolutely fire you, which means you technically can be fired. So just something to think about. And you might have a better work-life balance, but I'm also going to put an asterisk here. That's also not always completely true. Remember the saying I just had with, I sleep like a baby because I'm a business owner. I wake up every 2 hours and cry. Think about it that way. There are a lot of spillover effects being a business owner, because you have to work late at night, on the weekends, etc. So the work-life balance isn't necessarily better for business owners. However, if you have stocks or bonds or other forms of passive investments, the work-life balance certainly is better, or should be better, typically. So let's take a look at the actual assets here. The first asset I would myself at least recommend to me that I would buy and have bought in the past are Treasury Bonds. So especially during very volatile times in the stock market, and we have certainly seen volatile times with geopolitical volatility recently, different wars escalating around the world in the Middle East. Sometimes people, and it depends on your risk tolerance and your age and your retirement goals, etc., might want to push money into Treasury bonds. So first, let's take a look. What are Treasury bonds? Because Treasury bonds in general, they're pretty conservative, meaning safe assets. They're not as much exposed to stock market volatility. So very briefly, I found this image, and I thought I did a good job explaining it. It's essentially U.S. government debt that pay the holder, so you, right? You are the holder, an interest payment twice a year. So that's what Treasury bonds are. So in other words, you are lending money to the United States, okay? And in general, the US has been known to be one of the safest investments. Why? Because the US generally pays back you, the lender, the principal. So you get the principal, which is originally what you pay or what you give to the United States, plus you get an interest payment. Notice how this says interest payment, not dividend payment. Dividends are referenced to stocks. Interest is what's referenced to bonds. So you get an interest payment. You might get it twice a year. You might get it once every 12 months. It really depends on the bond type. But here in this case, we have it twice a year. So this is you giving money to the United States of America government. So again, very generally, pretty good quality investment because you're going to get your investment back plus some interest. Is it going to be a lot of interest? No, it's not, because it's so safe. If the United States defaults and if the United States cannot pay you back, we have much bigger problems happening than you not getting your money back. Because if the US cannot pay back you and other investors in the United States, then the US is probably going to be downgraded by Moody's, by Fitch, by S&P ratings, and so much more. And there's probably a lot worse happening out there in the world. So I wouldn't really worry about the US not being able to pay back, because if that was the case, we would have chaos on our hands, or at least it would not be looking good. So a government bond, just to very briefly explain, I thought this image did also a very good job. You have governments take loans from the public. So that means you. So you are giving a loan to the government. And they do that by issuing bonds. So if the government needs money from the public, they issue these bonds, they push them out to the public, right? So here's this bond, it's pushed out to the public. The public is like, great, I can make a little bit of money, I don't have to take a ton of risk. So they give money to the government uses that money and invests in infrastructure or whatever else it needs it for. And then it returns this money to you, the investors, with interest income, exactly what we talked about before. When the actual moment is when the government gives you back your principal, so interest, just to make sure we differentiate here, interest is paid maybe monthly or it's paid annually. Let's just say annually, okay? So interest is paid annually, but your principal is only paid once. So this is the original amount of money that you gave to the government. The principal is paid one time back to you. And at that point, your and the government's obligation is done, meaning they have satisfied everything. They've paid you your interest. They're done paying you. And that principal is paid to you upon what is known as maturity. So when the bond matures, and this could be in 1 year, it could be in 20 years, it could even be in 30 years, okay? That's generally the length. So 30 years is generally the longest period of time that a bond takes to mature. At that point, you get your principal back, your capital investment, whatever you put in originally, and all of the interest payments have already been completed, right? Because it does pay over like every 6 months, every year, whatever the agreement is. So upon maturity, you, the investor, earn back the full principal, the full amount that you originally gave to the government. So why would I personally put my money in these treasury bonds? I would think of it because they're safe. They're backed by the full faith of the US government. There are tax benefits. So for example, some of the bonds, like the interest, for example, wouldn't necessarily be taxable income. There are certain types of bonds like municipal bonds or whatnot. It gets into a little bit more complexity. I'm not going to go into that, but in general, there are tax benefits. And then they also pay consistently. So again, if your goal is to have some sort of reliable, safe income, this could possibly be it. Is it going to be a lot? No, it's not probably going to be life-changing, but it's going to be a little bit. And a little bit is better than nothing, in my opinion. Now, the downside is there's really no growth, at least not compared to stocks, right? So stocks, we have opportunity for growth. They're also higher risk. So you have a higher risk of losing your money. So there's also no FDIC insurance. FDIC is when you put your money into a bank account, and if the bank fails for whatever reason, think the Silicon Valley Bank collapse in 2023, then if your money is at Silicon Valley Bank goes bust, The government, meaning this here, the Federal Depository Insurance Corporation, FDIC, steps in and pays you back your cash, however much you had in there, up to $250,000 per bank per account holder. So if you have a Treasury bond and the government goes bust, again, we would have much worse issues on our hand than you losing your money. But if that is the case, there is no FDIC insurance and you would not get your money replaced. And then finally, interest does fall down, meaning you actually get less in interest payments if the Federal Reserve cuts rates. Now, if you've been following what's been going on recently in 2025 with the Federal Reserve Board, they have not yet cut rates, but the assumption is they likely will cut rates. And if they do cut rates, chances are the Treasury bonds or treasuries in general might not do that well. So this here is one option. This here's an ETF, but it's based on SGOV, short-term government, basically. Dividends, that's why I see the word dividend here, because it is an ETF, but it very closely tracks what is happening with the Treasury market. So specifically, this is what I personally would invest in. So this is something that is an ultra short-term U.S. Treasury bill, so very short-term, 0 to 3 months. It's an ETF, it's a monthly dividend based on interest income. So you get this interest income paid out monthly. The Federal Reserve, and just to kind of give you an idea of how these dividends move and why they move up and down, well, the Federal Reserve sets the rates, just like we spoke about, and the short-term Treasury yields, they closely follow this rate. So whatever the Federal Reserve does in order to boost economic activity, like stimulus or not, these rates closely follow what the Fed does. So the Fed really determines a lot of the economy, including your own high yield savings account interest rates. So it has a big impact. And then depending on what these short-term Treasury yield rates do, then that can impact the actual fund itself or the actual Treasury bonds themselves, the yields of the bonds. So that's one. It's a safe option. The second option is dividend ETFs. So these are a little bit more risky, specifically stock ETFs. So I would look at three. The way I categorized it is 3 buckets. I would look at first U.S. dividend ETFs, second international dividend ETFs, and third real estate dividend ETFs. And these are REITs, right? Real estate investment trusts. So moving to the U.S. dividend ETF, my preferred one would be VYM. It's a Vanguard High Dividend Yield ETF. The expense ratio is about 6%, so pretty cheap in my opinion. The year-to-date return is not dividend yield, but return is 2 to 3%, which is, it's okay. Not amazing, but it's okay. And then I'm going to jump to this picture here briefly. So as you can see, the equity style box shows me that they are very large companies held in this particular ETF. So I'm thinking very blue chip companies and they're value companies. So they're likely not going to grow. So that's what I can see from that. So the average dividend's 2.7 to 2.85%. This is okay. It's not ultra high yield. Ultra high yield would probably be like 8% or higher. But if I see a dividend that's 8% or higher, I would be wondering what's wrong with it because it's probably not good quality. These are generally very high quality, which is why if it's higher quality, there's lower risk, which means the return is lower. The second one would be VYMI. So this is international focused. We got 17 basis points. That's the expense ratio, so a little bit more expensive. We got year-to-date returns about 17%. Think about it because of the tariffs and a lot of volatility with the U.S. That's probably some of the reason why. Some of the regions here, we're looking at EMs, emerging markets, 21%, but the biggest sector here is Europe, which would make sense, right? 44%, because a lot of companies are over in Europe as well. Average dividends, we're looking 4.2 to 4.3%. And then finally, for the real estate, I would be looking at VNQ, Vanguard Real Estate REIT, and that is about 13 basis points. We got a pretty low year-to-date return. Some of these sectors I would like to hone in on. Healthcare REITs. I think these are great because they pay consistently. We're talking hospitals, we're talking nursing homes. Regardless if there's a recession or not, people are going to get likely sick, unfortunately, but they will get sick. And so they need hospitals, they need nursing homes, etc. So it's very stable income. Average dividends are 4 to 4.15% roughly per year. So not bad for extra income. The next point, we did just talk about REITs, real estate investment trusts. The next thing I would look at is actual real estate itself. And I actually did this before in my past life, so I can give you some insights. So the way it would work is you buy a house or a duplex or whatever type of property you can. You find a tenant, you rent it out, and then you get the profit. Sounds pretty easy, right? But it's not always that easy. I wanted to show you some hidden ongoing costs that a lot of real estate owners don't think about. And then you can make your own decision later on because there are tax advantages and then there's property appreciation if you buy in a good spot. There's obviously the income. So there's a lot of positives, but there are also a lot of ongoing expenses like utilities if you have to pay utilities, homeowners association fees, landlord insurance, and umbrella policy. So if someone slips and falls and breaks their leg on your investment property, then you're going to have to pay if they sue you. And that's why you have an umbrella policy. Professional property management fees. For example, if you own a property that's out of state or out of town, or even in town, but you have another job and you can't really focus on it 24/7, you're going to have to hire a property management company. And guess what? They generally charge an upfront fee of a few $1,000s plus a percentage of what your tenant pays you every single month. That's about 10% of what your tenant pays every month. So there are fees there. Rental licensing, you got to make sure your company and your rental agreement is legit. Property taxes, that's on you. Mortgage payment, you have to make sure the mortgage is paid even if, let's say, your tenants decide to move out. You still have to pay regardless. So that's something called a vacancy cost. So if they unexpectedly move out, you still have to keep paying, even if you don't have a replacement. Not to mention resident screening. You want to make sure you actually have a good tenant in there and, do a due diligence process. And then if you have maintenance, repairs, capital improvements, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the costs can really add up quite a bit. So here's another chart. For the sake of time, I'm going to keep moving, but feel free to look at it on your own time. These are two good, I think, formulas to look at. So we have NOI, net operating income. It just looks at your overall revenue. So how much is your tenant paying you minus operating expenses. So these are some of the operating expenses that we talked about. So that gives you an idea of what your net operating income is, your take home. And then there's something called a cap rate or a capitalization rate. And what that does, it divides the NOI, the net operating income, by the property value. And you get a percentage, right? So that equals a percentage. And generally you want to have a cap rate between 4% to 12%. That's average, and that means you're doing okay. If it's below that, not so good, and you might want to reassess your expenses or how much you're charging your tenant. Next up is owning a business. Let me tell you some statistics. Are small business owners working overtime? Most of them do. Trust me, I did. I worked about 100 plus hours to 120 hours a week. Yes, a week when I owned my business and when I am owning my business. That has finally settled down, but at least when I owned it in the beginning, the first, I'd say, year or so, maybe 2 years, I was working a lot. So it's a lot of work. Business owners who work weekends, 89% do. Absolutely, I did. Small business owner salary in the United States, $127,000. That's the average, and that's not bad at all. But you also have to think about how much effort and time are you putting into that to get $127,000. I calculated how much I made my first 2 years. I mean, I made hourly, on an hourly basis. I did not make a lot of money because of the number of hours I put into my business. So you just got to see, do you enjoy it? That's okay. Are you learning from it? That's okay. And maybe the money might not always be there immediately, but it might follow down the road. Small and medium-sized business owners are more likely to succeed between the ages of 30 to 50. I wanted to point this out because a lot of people, at least whom I have spoken to, they say that you need to be, in your teens or in your early 20s in order to build a business. But oftentimes that's not necessarily the case. You actually get more successful building your own business with some experience, because you can start, building yourself, meeting more people, more clients, learning structures from companies, and then at some point, then you can go out and venture into the world and build your own business, or do it concurrently while working a job, a 9-to-5, and build your business on the side. So just want to make sure that it's never too late to build and own your own business, okay? If you're 40 or 50 or even 60 years old and you haven't started a business, that is absolutely okay. There is time. Next up, small business owners' education statistics. Just wanted to share this. 44% of small business owners hold a bachelor's degree. 56 don't have a college degree at all. So again, you don't need to be college educated to be a business owner. And 20% only have a high school diploma. It's okay. It's a fifth. 1 out of 5 people have a high school diploma. The point is, you can make it work regardless of your education background. The whole thing, the whole key is your drive. Income statistics here. I think this one's important. Over 86% of small business owners in the US earn less than $100,000 yearly. So this should be more of a passion, right, than maybe your full-time income. Unless you genuinely love it, then there's nothing wrong with it. 14% earn more than 6 figures yearly. That's not bad, but that's also not that much. It's like, it's less than 1 in 5. The average small business owner in the US makes about $72,000 annually. Again, not bad at all. If you're making $30,000 right now and you're moving up to $72,000, that's a huge bump up. But if you're making $300,000 right now and you're going down to $72,000, that's a big bump down. So it just depends on your starting position and what your goals are. So what you can do right now, you can either start a business or you can buy one. One option to buy is called Biz Buy Sell. So you can find businesses that are for sale, franchises that are for sale, or you can sell your own business. So I thought that was kind of cool and I wanted to share that with you. And then finally, peer-to-peer lending. This is essentially you being the bank. You're giving your money to a borrower, and then the borrower is going to pay interest and return your capital, ideally at least. Now, the idea of peer-to-peer lending, it is a little bit risky. The reason why it's risky is because the borrower here likely got rejected by the bank because they maybe failed some sort of credit test or something like that. So now they're going to a peer-to-peer lending platform. So you do have more risk as the lender, because the borrower might not be as credible or maybe won't have the funds in time, etc. But because there is more risk, you're probably going to get more return. So one of these platforms is called Fundrise. It's a real estate platform. This is peer-to-peer lending. You can see real estate strategies. You can see, all of these returns up over 10%. I think that there's obviously a lot more risk. There's also a reason why this fund is called opportunistic. But I wanted to share this with you. Again, fixed income fund, 6 to 8% in income, total return 6 to 8% is not bad at all. But again, you have to just weigh your options and weigh the risk that you're taking. So most important thing though, as always, is start building wealth now. That is absolute key. The earlier, the better. And if you found this video helpful, please, I would love it if you like this video and if you share this video with your friends to help them. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. A subscription would mean so much, so thank you in advance. And join my newsletter at the bottom of this description for more exclusive tips. Your bank accounts will thank you later. Thanks, everyone.